Thank you
Thanks.
very much, Ian. Prof Moll. That was fascinating, and you've, as expected, you've thrown a spanner in the works, or a cat among the pigeons, or a spanner in the robot, maybe. That was extremely interesting. Right, questions, comments? Dr. Suresh Baba Naidu says, excellent knowledge flow from Ian Moll.
Not excellent yet, but thank you for that.
And Sharon Jeet says, absolutely relevant presentation, Ian. Thank you. The glib dialogue on skills development is quite scary and dangerous in my view. Besankari says, thank you, Ian, very interesting. Gerda Buerta says, excellent. Can you predict what the next stage of development will be in robotics as a breakthrough?
Okay, can I try and respond to those last two comments?
Yes.
Sorry, I missed the name of the person who was talking about the dramatic breakthroughs in the laboratory context. And I'm trying to find it in the chat room at the moment.
Gerda Buerta.
The name sounded a bit like party or party.
Oh, okay.
Here it is. New technologies in analytics, automation, and big data analysis are revolutionizing research, and laboratories are changing faster than ever before. Now, I think that's an extremely contentious claim. And the writings that I've been doing recently, for example, on trying to challenge some of the ideologies that go with the so-called Fourth Industrial Revolution, amongst other things, have challenged that particular assumption about the context of discovery and of the generation of new forms of technology in laboratory contexts, which are indeed revolutionary if you use the word revolution to mean revolutionary in their own context, okay? But claims that they are revolutionary in a more general sense, in other words, revolutions at the level of society and culture, or even at the level of dramatic transformations of technology, of the kind that took place in the three industrial revolutions that we've seen up to now, I think are quite spurious. So Dr. Padi, I would actually want to debate that issue with you much more substantially. And I've challenged some of those claims about the nature of laboratory transformations in the second of the papers that you see on screen. Not quite yet published, but it will be published very soon. And as Jansi had said earlier, it will be available to you on the NSTF website as soon as it becomes available. But what I'm saying to you is that I think that those claims that you make in that particular box in the chat forum are in fact wrong. If you think about laboratory knowledge and the development of technology in laboratories. That led to a question about, can I predict what the next level of development of laboratory technology is? The development of sensor technology, for example, is taking particular forms. No, in fact, let me not talk about that one. One of the most interesting and indeed highly revolutionary developments in recent years in laboratory-based technological development is the development of the bionic hand, okay, which is an artificial computer-based prosthesis, which one puts onto the arm connects to the arm of a person. And what happens is it translates electrical impulses from the brain, from the human brain, which are neurological electrical impulses, translates them into electronic impulses that digital technology can read in terms of binary configurations, and therefore produce movement. And what happens is that the person can, in fact, control the use of that bionic hand because of those dramatic technology developments. Now, that's an amazing development, and it's one of the cutting-edge transformations in contemporary technology that is taking place in relation to computerization and robotics, a robotic hand, in other words. And that particular development is going to have all kinds of ramifications for other developments in robotics, etc. So that's where I think it's going to happen. Yeah, that's to try and answer that question quite quickly. I know at Wits University there's a laboratory that participates in that particular development of that bionic hand, and they're doing very interesting stuff where they're making progress. I mean, as Thomas Kuhn said, the developments in science are not generally revolutionary. They are normal science as it proceeds in laboratory contexts. But that's where I think the most interesting next developments are going to take place in relation to robotics. But I'm not a scientist. I'm not a robotics scientist, so I'm not talking as an insider here. In the functions I'm performing here, I'm a historian of technology. Yeah, thanks for that. That was a nice question.
Thank you, Ian, and thanks for that question. Sharanjeet.
Okay, thank you, Ian. That was absolutely magnificent, splendid. What can one say? I hear the words 4IR, you don't like them. What would be your view on 5IR, which has been floated around since 2018? I actually attended the first ever seminar in the UK in 2018 already on 5IR. And
and there's also a 6IR, by the way.
What would you replace these words with for schools?
Look, I mean, that whole issue of the 6 industrial revolutions, is a set of thinking about technological development that comes from the work of Carlotta Perez and her predecessors, going back to an Austrian thinker about so-called, what is the term he uses? It's about innovation. Anyway, the importance of innovation in technological transformation. But that's a particular framework that I think is not the same one as the one that is used about industrial revolutions. And Carlotta Perez, when she talks about the first phase of technological development, she unfortunately gives it the label the first industrial revolution. And then she talks about a further 4, actually. She doesn't posit a 6th. She talks about a four further technological revolutions. But she doesn't expand the concept to industrial revolution, despite the fact that she used that concept, I think, unfortunately, where she spoke about the first technological revolution at the time, the mid-18th century, the 1760s, 1770s, etc. So, Sharanjeet, what I'm really saying is that I think that let's call it the discourse about the 5th and the 6th industrial revolutions is in fact not about industrial revolutions. It's about technological revolution. And what I'm wanting to do is to plug the arguments back into debates about what industrial revolutions are, which are much, much broader than technological revolutions. They're about fundamental social transformations at cultural, social, geopolitical, colonial, neo-colonial, etc. level. Yes. So I hope that's a coherent answer, but that's the quickest answer I can give to your question. I don't think it's the same discourse, and I don't think you can map them onto each other.
How would the teachers get their head around it would be interesting.
Well, I'm not suggesting that teachers need to know this kind of stuff. I'm trying to answer your question.
I know. Yeah. Thank you for that.
Okay.
Yes, maybe I can interject there and say that for me, the industrial revolutions are more about what happens to the workforce during economic transformation, and that you may have technological transitions happening, but the important thing why it's revolutionary is because the kind of disruption is very dramatic. It's vast. It's distressing, and it changes the way things are in economies for the rest of time. I mean, for time going forward. And thinking about the 5th and the 6th industrial revolution just doesn't make sense to me. How do you define those anyway? We have such difficulty defining or naming the so-called fourth industrial revolution. So
Yeah.
how can one even venture into the future revolutions? It's as though we have the kind of agency that we can plan these things, and it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, this is all ideology.
Yeah.
And the ideology has particular functions, by the way, but it is all. I think the notion of a fourth industrial revolution is ideological. I don't think there is such a thing in concrete terms. This is a concrete socio-economic phenomenon. But anyway, that's a longer argument which you can read about elsewhere if you want to. But there's nothing really that has been transformed by the so-called fourth industrial revolution of the early 21st century that has transformed society and the economy and the nature of the workforce in the way that they were transformed by the third industrial revolution.
Very interesting.
So that's a historical argument which one needs to look at quite carefully.
Right.
But if you read Klaus Schwab, well, you're reading the ideology, eh?
Yes. Yes. Yes, he coined the term for our.
Yeah, well, he popularized the term.
He popularized it. Very interesting. Of course, the 4R is part of government policy. And so one does need to engage with it. And somehow, I mean, lots of people have argued that there are better terms for 4R for what we're talking about. Well,
I mean, I think a deepening of the third industrial revolution is the right way to think about it. And I think it's important that government does respond to it in the way that it is. But as soon as you construe it as fourth industrial revolution, then you're plugging into a different kind of ideological frame that is related to the international neoliberal resuscitation order of things. Yeah.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Ian. Right, Vilna has just posted a note. We have had discussions about the fourth industrial revolutions before in NSTF, and so you can have a look online at the discussions that we had there. We spoke about the fourth industrial revolution for industry, society, and education. And then later we had a discussion about automation and advanced manufacturing, where we referred to the fourth industrial revolution as well. But we've had challenges in all discussion forums where we've spoken about the fourth industrial revolution, that it isn't an appropriate term. It's just hard to talk about this sort of collection of technologies. If you don't call it something, you've got to call it something.